Hey everybody, it's Devin.
And it's Kate.
Welcome to Med Crimes.
Devin, we're back. Remote.
I don't know why when I just said welcome to Med Crimes, I kind of felt like I haven't said it in a while.
It
hasn't been that long.
No,
I don't know.
Been a
couple of weeks.
Been a couple weeks, dude.
I don't know.
When it's like me and you are apart, that's like a long ass time. Doesn't matter what interval it is.
Forever.
Welcome back, everybody. Happy every other Tuesday.
I apologize. This was going to be a Devinism today. However, it's not.
There's some shit going down. It's all good stuff. It's all okay. It's just hectic holiday season. Jobs are hectic. Lots of like personal life, new developments and change.
And fortunately, about 3 days ago, I said to Kate, I don't know if I'm going to pull this off, man. And she said, I'm working on something right now.
I was like,
God love you.
I got you,
God
boo.
love you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited because this is the first time we're doing remote where I have my light ring. So I'm not like dark, ghosty, creepy figure.
No, you're not like a shadow person that looks like a demon. You are a living, breathing human being, which is so refreshing.
Once again, thank you, Patreons.
Thank you, Patreons. Speaking of Patreons,
who do we have new today?
Beautiful collection.
Oh, yay.
Okay.
Kate Smolka. Welcome to the family.
Kate Smolka is probably smoking.
I'm just going to say she's a smoking hot Kate. We have a welcome to the family of Kates. We have a few.
Yes, we do have a few. Then we have Ashley Van Lowe, which is another like one of those names that I'm
Ashley.
Like, yeah, Ashley.
I've been seeing Ashley a lot on our little notifications with social medias.
We have a lot of Ashleys.
Your name sticks out to me, Ashley.
I mean, I love me some Ashley.
Oh, I love how this name is spelled. Tiffany Crundwell.
Tiffany with an I-E.
Tiffany with an I-E. I love it. It's beautiful.
Yes.
Welcome to the family.
You guys are like mystical little foxes jumping around in the foggy meadow, and I love you.
Are foxes mystical?
These ones are.
Yes. Our next episode is going to be just after the holidays. So right now I'll just say Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Meli Kalikimaka, whatever you say.
Yes. Happy holidays to all of you.
Happy all of them.
Yes.
So Kate, I have no idea what it is that you put together. What do we have?
Because we had not even gotten a chance to even really talk
about it. Not a freaking clue.
So this was actually one of the entries on our recent Patreon pick vote episode that I promised I would cover, even though David Kwiatkowski won that contest and we covered him. So this is Kristin Rossum, who is the American toxicologist who used her skills and access to addictive medications and drugs to commit a shocking crime.
Shocking? How shocking?
I mean, it's pretty shocking. Although... So this is, again, a two-parter because I'm an absolute Neanderthal and just can't seem to rule it in, like, to save my life. This first episode...
I'm the opposite. I have a hard time expanding. I get to the grit.
No, I mean, you're a good expander as well. It's all good. There was just... I tend to pick episodes that have, like, a lot of books written about them, so there's a lot of information out there. And on this particular one... There are a couple of books that were super, super helpful, and there's a lot of information here on her childhood, her upbringing, and what happened in like her early adult life that sort of led up to the crime. And without further ado, we are going to talk about We are going to talk about Kristin Rossum. So, the book that I got most of my information from was actually Deadly American Beauty by John Glatt, and this murder was actually known as the American Beauty murder. And we won't really know why during this episode. We're going to get into it more in depth in part 2. So
no, I don't deal well with that.
It's going to be great. Anyway, Kristin Marguerite Rossum was born October 25th, 1976 in Memphis, Tennessee. Her parents were Ralph and Constance Rossum. Ralph was a college professor at a local college, and her mom worked there too in like an administrative position. She had two brothers that were younger than her, Brent and Pierce. And shortly after her birth, they actually relocated to Chicago, Illinois, where her father was offered this big teaching position at Loyola University. And he was teaching politics and criminal justice. Now, as a child, Kristin was very heavily into dance. And she actually recalled that when she was really little, her mom brought her to see the Nutcracker, the ballet.
Aww.
And that just inspired her to, she was like, that's what I want to do. Like, this is my life now. I want to dance.
That's the Nutcracker, right?
Yes, it's totally the Nutcracker. So from that point on, that was like a life-altering moment for Kristin, and she was like, I'm a ballerina now. And she started in hot and heavy into classes as early as she could, and she spent a lot of time and energy on ballet, and we'll get into it more. But Ralph, Kristin's dad, was actually an accomplished scholar. He published articles, papers, and actually started venturing into writing books a few years after they moved to Loyola University, Chicago, where he worked at Loyola. And he had published his first book on criminal justice. And then just a few years after that, the Reagan administration invited him to join the Justice Department. He was
her
offered,
dad?
Her dad, yes.
Wow.
He was offered the position of deputy director of the Bureau of Justice Statistics, which he took.
That sounds so official.
In 1983. Yeah, I mean, this was like a huge deal. I mean, he was already kind of a big deal because he was a accomplished and respected professor, and now he's like essentially like taking a political role with it. With this new position, of course, they had to move to the capital. So they relocated to Bethesda, Maryland, which is right outside of D.C. And
I love D.C.
Yeah, I know. You went down there. Yeah. And then Constance became the marketing manager for Marriott Hotels. So they were now both making like a shitload of good money. And yeah, and they enrolled their kids in like some super prestigious like private schools. And Kristin was actually sent to the prestigious Seven Locks Elementary School at age 8. And she got straight A's right off the bat. She was very much into science and loved anything scientific like biology, math. She was incredible at it very, very early on.
From elementary school?
From elementary school, yes. She was very into it. And then Kristin was described as a very, very high energy person in general, very eager to learn. And in DC, her mom signed her up for a dance class there as well. And the cool thing was that Seven Locks, her elementary school, actually had an affiliation program with the American Ballet Company.
Of course they did.
Which is like the most prestigious ballet company, like professional ballet organization in the country. And they had like
connections.
Yeah, and they had like kids classes there, like that were fostered by the ABC, which is like incredible. So she starts dancing really seriously there, and she was a natural. Like, again, right off the bat, she was just really killing it. She was confident, and like you put her on stage and she would just shine. And
That's
she
amazing.
was just so in her element, and she was like just obsessed with it.
I've always been amazed at how ballet dancers can get up on their tippy toes like they do.
Oh my God. And what's so amazing is how easy they make it look and how effortless it looks. Like when someone
really, it's painful from what I've heard.
But it's like so many years of practice and pain and discomfort and the freaking shoes and what they have to do to their poor feet. It's wild. It floors me. I watch TikToks about ballerinas sometimes and I'm like, damn, wow.
I don't have time to watch TikTok.
I know you really don't right now. You legitimately do not.
I forgot the Patriots were playing right now.
Oh my God, Devin.
Someone said at like 8 o'clock, they're like, and now I'm being forced to watch the Patriots game. And I'm like, I forgot it was on.
Oh my God, you poor thing. Also, poor Devin. It's a miracle that she's here, you guys. So let's all just give Devin some finger snaps for literally just showing the fuck up for this, because wow. So one thing that just always kept her head on straight was dance. This was like her big thing, her one activity that she just like poured herself into. Ultimately, at this school, she danced in Romeo and Juliet. They put on a show of Romeo and Juliet, and she recalled that this recital was like a high point in her life. Like, she just felt great. This was like her first big show, like her first big recital, and she was like, yep, so that just checked the box.
Her parents have connections. Early on, she's really getting into the academics, and then she's just excelling as a dancer.
100%.
She's got it going on. I bet you she was beautiful. I have to see a picture of her.
I seriously Google her right now, Devin, because she is breathtakingly beautiful. She's gorgeous. Like, she's gorgeous. Her father, Ralph, was like this prominent figure now, right? And her family was like starting to routinely bump elbows with like other high up government officials and their families. They actually recalled that Justice Scalia would frequently visit their home, like with his family, when Kristin was really young. And Ralph's future was like getting bigger and brighter, and he was getting offered all these new opportunities. And soon he was offered a position as a professor at Claremont McKenna College, which was in Southern California. So this is an incredibly prestigious liberal arts college, and they offered him like a lot of money to go there. So she's now at age 8. She's only briefly been in DC for like less than a year, and the family is now uprooting again, moving from DC all the way to Claremont, California. So she starts taking classes a couple times a week after they resettle in California at a dance studio in Anaheim, which was like a couple hours away from where they lived, because that was like the closest really decent dance studio that they could find in the area. And so it was like twice a week, and it was quite a long drive, but her dad like committed to bringing her, and he did. Ralph, didn't matter how busy he was, dad always brought her to dance. And
that's what we do as parents.
Yes, exactly. And they started like really making a thing out of these car rides that they would have together. Aww. And this ended up being like a tradition. Like, dad always brought Kristin to dance because the car rides were long, memories, and they would talk and they would just reminisce and they would bond. And this was something that really strengthened their relationship.
I have that with thinking of like when we would go camping, we used to have to take 2 cars, and I always got to ride with my dad in the car full of all the shit and all the songs we would sing on the way to camping. Like, those are the memories she's creating. So now I'm thinking, where the F did you go wrong, girlfriend?
Sometimes it's like the little things that just...
And I know we're only up to like age 8, 9-ish. Yeah. So, and I'm already wondering what went wrong. But
yeah, some things happen in this poor girl's life. So they both like really genuinely enjoyed these long car rides, and it became like this ritual, and they would talk about science and dance and all of the other things that Kristin was really, really into. So this continues for like a couple years. So years pass. Kristin is now 13. All these years she's been dancing a couple times a week. And, when you reach 13, she's beginning to fall into this age group where she and her peers are now like developing, right? Like physically developing. So in ballet, you're under so much pressure, especially around this time, to be tall. First of all, ballerinas need to be really tall in order to dance well, according to what these standards are. You have to be rail thin. You have to have these tiny, tiny feet. If your feet are too big, they say, it's not going to work. You're not going to dance. And all of these other physical characteristics that like less than 2% of the population
like a flat chest, essentially. You need to have a flat chest. No development there whatsoever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that starts adding like this whole other layer to Kristin's, love of ballet. And the top performers, and the ones that would get cast in all these good roles would be really tall, really strong, and Kristin noticed that she was growing to be not very tall. And she responded to this by pushing harder and practicing more so that she could be taken as seriously as her classmates that were taller than her. And,
make her stand out a little bit more.
Exactly. She, as someone who was shorter, really had to step it up and just make her technicality just that much more excellent so that people would look at her for casting. And so by age 4.
What a hard thing to do when
Yes.
you're in that vulnerable teenage years.
Yes.
Like, we all know what body image stuff we go through at 13 and 14 years
Yes.
old as young girls.
Yes.
And then to have that pressure where your passion essentially like almost demands, you know.
Exactly.
Obviously there's exceptions, but very few.
Exactly.
That you have a certain physique. And
Yes,
that's a lot of pressure for
exactly.
a young girl.
It is. And, you know, at this point, you know, she's by around age 14, she's like, I want to be a career ballerina. Like, you don't understand.
Wow.
This is not just an activity. I want this to be my career. So she started spending most of her waking hours dancing. Like, she would wake up, she would practice multiple times a day. She would stretch, she would exercise. And she wanted to sign on with a company and like the ABC and work as a ballerina. That's what she wanted to do.
I want to be a Radio City Rockette.
Well, Devin, you can
I
do
don't
anything
have the
you
legs. My legs are holding me back.
Most people don't have the legs for that.
It's just my legs.
Devin has literally everything else, just not the legs.
Yeah.
So her hard work did seem to start paying off when she was cast as the Sugar Plum Fairy in a production of The Nutcracker. Yeah. So family and friends were in the audience. It was this whole big deal. It was this like beautiful moment for Kristin and one of the highlights as her of her experience in ballet, like altogether. So shortly after this, her father Ralph was offered a year-long sabbatical. If you're not familiar with what a sabbatical is, it's essentially from teaching, it's a paid leave to travel or study somewhere else for a period of time where you won't be teaching. And they essentially pay you to do that so that you can come back and teach better or teach about what you learn. So he was being sent to Virginia, back to the East Coast.
And taking the family with him.
Yes, exactly. So Kristin, now 14, this is 1991, Kristin is 14. She's, again, moving completely away with her family. And remember, this is only a sabbatical. She's going to be there for a year. So this is, again, only a brief thing.
It's kind of like life of the military almost.
It almost is, where you're just constantly being uprooted, constantly being moved. It had to have been very jarring for her, and, you know, to do all these sudden things that were all so brief. And it's like, can I actually make friends? Like, can I do that? You know, like just not even knowing. So she had just finished her freshman year in high school, and moves around the country were nothing new for her, obviously, because she had done it again. But I mean, she's an adolescent now. So also, you know, as an adolescent and in high school having to start over, like, that's totally different too. That's a totally different ballgame. When you're a little kid, you're resilient. You don't give a shit where you are as long as you have your family. But when you're an adolescent, you know, it's a whole nother situation. So she dove even deeper into dance to cope. And a few months back in the East Coast, something kind of devastating happened. Kristin and her dance partner were doing a lift during rehearsal, and her partner dropped her. She ended up tearing a ligament in her ankle. And this type of injury does warrant quite a long recovery, because ligament injuries like this do take quite a while to heal. And during her first 2 months of recovery, she was told by doctors, you need to rest. You really cannot bear any weight on this. And once you heal up, if you follow these directions, you will be able to dance again. It really should not hold you back. She got really restless, though, and was panicking that this healing period would set her back and she would lose a lot of ground if she kept sitting around. So against her doctor's advice, she started dancing again on this injured ligament. By not resting a torn ligament, she, of course, increased the risk of improper healing by creating inflammation and subsequently scar tissue around the ligament. And that
probably
can
more pain, turning it
well,
into
that's the thing. It
from
can
acute
create
to chronic pain.
Yes, that's exactly right. It creates chronic limitations of range of motion, chronic pain, chronic inflammation. It can
all
trigger
things she would need to be a ballerina.
And it can trigger arthritis. It could potentially, it could result in like weight bearing, like these are weight bearing joints. Like this is one of the most weight bearing joints in your whole body. And you can suffer like more tissue tears. You can suffer fractures. So when she was dancing, though, she like didn't feel any pain. So she was like, I don't see why I can't dance on this foot, even though the doctors say I'm not ready. So she starts slowly dancing, and she does it more and more, and unfortunately sustains another fall and suffered an even more devastating injury. She suffered a stress fracture in her foot, which is like a small crack in the bone that can be acute or can even become chronic. Usually these are due to like repetitive motions or a change in exercise pattern, but for her, it's probably a combination of the repetitive motion, incredible stress on the feet itself, and obviously the existing ligament injury and the inflammation that was there. So this unfortunately became a chronic source of pain for Kristin. And she was told by doctors that she could walk, she could run, she could even exercise, but her ballet career is over. She could not dance again. So,
and she's how old?
So this was when she's still 14.
Oh,
14. Okay. So she had poured her heart, soul, time, effort since very young childhood, and was planning on this being her literal entire life. And it was also like her therapy and her coping mechanism during these stressful periods in life when she was moving a lot, she was needing to start over and make new friends. So this was a completely life-altering situation for her. And I think this was a big turning point. So she's struggling at this point to like sort of re-identify herself, right? Since dancing was basically her whole identity. She turns 15. She makes a few new friends with her new school in Virginia and sort of ends up falling in with like a not so great crowd. She starts drinking alcohol and she picks up a smoking habit.
You're so like
impressionable.
Impressionable. I was going to say manipulative. I was like, that's not the right word, but impressionable at that young age. And when she's obviously dealing with such a tragedy, she's got this trauma right now, and it's probably triggering significant depression.
100%. Yes. She might be like self-medicating to a point, just to, finding a way to cope. So summer of 1992, Ralph's sabbatical comes to an end, and it's time for them to return to Claremont, California. They did actually relocate their house and upgraded to like this really nice, fancy like mini mansion type house, which was kind of cool. Now her junior year, she never really connected with her old friends that she had left the year prior, that she was close to before she left. They had all sort of felt that she had changed, and really they weren't into the same things anymore. Kristin was, drinking pretty regularly, and she was really starting to enjoy it more. At age 16, she had made this crowd of new friends who were into similar habits like drinking, cigarettes, and pot. One night at a school football game, one of her friends offered her some crystal meth. And she hesitated at first, but then she snorted it and recalls that this was the most euphoric moment of her life. Now,
it probably felt similar to the high that she had when she was ballet dancing.
Well, probably. And also, that first high when you do any hard drug is so life altering, which is what gets people addicted. And again, I've said in other podcast episodes that this is where I'm very naive, but I feel like I've read a lot of things or watched a lot of things when they're talking about with addicts. You're always chasing that first high. That's absolutely
and that's
absolutely
what's so
right.
dangerous about that addiction is you always want that feeling back again.
Exactly
of what
right.
That first high felt like,
and you never get it. Exactly right.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
And so crystal meth is a popular street drug that produces a high that's characterized by an increased sense of self, feelings of power and indestructibility, euphoria, and increased energy. And using drugs like this at a young age can cause permanent brain damage, actually, and lasting neurological and psychological issues. And it has innumerable negative effects and is extremely habit-forming. This was the beginning of a pretty intense downward spiral. She very quickly fell very hard into addiction, and her grades started to fall. She had always gotten incredible grades because she was just so incredibly smart. And that started to really change. And her loved ones noticed that she was always tired and she was acting different, and they started to suspect that maybe she was depressed. At first, they never thought that she would have a drug problem. Not Kristin. You know, she is a very straight-edged young lady.
Not the girl from the
Nutcracker
family. And
not the sugar plum fairy. Yeah, exactly. So her addiction started to ramp up, as they do. And some more noticeable physical changes happened. Like, she started losing weight. Some of her hair was falling out. She developed sores on her face, all things that are very characteristic of a bad meth addiction. Yeah. Now, within few months, she was using meth multiple times a day just to maintain and just to be upright and walking around. Parents started to suspect. Sad. I know, it's devastating.
That's awful.
Now, her parents started to suspect she was depressed again, but again, didn't suspect drugs. And they even went on vacation once and left Kristin in charge of the house. Like, this is how much they were completely in the dark. We're going to see that Kristin is incredible at hiding her habit from people. And she is a very good liar. She hid it from a lot of people. The
physical changes didn't start to bother them?
Well, I mean, it did. They noticed it, but she was just so convincing and otherwise such a great kid that they were like, there's no way our 16-year-old is a meth addict. Like, that just doesn't make sense. And I think that's probably the reality for a lot of parents of teens who end up with a hard drug habit. Like, I never thought that my kid would do this, and no parent ever dreams that this would be their kid. So her parents leave Kristin in charge of the house for a weekend when they go away. Of course, when they were gone, she did the typical teenage thing and threw this big raging party in their house.
That's what they do.
Yes, what they do. There were some pretty shifty characters there, though, and her two younger brothers were, not a fan of the crowd that ended up in their house. Wow. And they actually suspected, something else is going on because, sometimes siblings get, a different perspective on things than the parents do. And they're privy to a little bit more. So,
oh God, that makes me so scared for when my kids are older.
I know, isn't it scary?
What are they hiding from me?
Right? So one day, they actually waited until Kristin was out of the house and they started going through her room. Her brothers did. And they found some drug paraphernalia, which included a glass pipe, a razor, and a mirror. And the boys brought it to her and confronted her. And then she denied it and said that, they were being stupid. And then they brought it to her parents when they returned from the vacation. And the parents confronted her. And Kristin, of course, got very defensive and denied the entire thing. And there was somewhat of an altercation. She tried to leave the house at one point, and then the police were called. A social worker ended up showing up. It was this huge deal. It was kind of a low point for her family. And they immediately were like, okay, well, I mean, if you really have a drug problem, we want to help you. And they enrolled her in this 12-step rehab program.
I was going to say, I imagine that they have excellent connections and resources to get her in help, which a lot of people don't.
Exactly right. And these rehab programs are just, it's so predatory how expensive they are. How are
insane.
How are people, the average person going to be able to afford a program like this? It's just wild.
Most can't. Can't.
Exactly. Yeah. So Kristin did try pretty hard to get off the drugs. And, she didn't want to be that person. This wasn't her. But she had, sadly, a very tough time. She did relapse, which is incredibly common with drug addiction. Recovery barely ever follows that straight path, eventually, especially when life-changing events happen. Relapses are so incredibly common. But for a brief period, she did pretty well. Mostly she had separated herself from her new friends that were the bad influence. Her family was pretty optimistic, and she started to turn things around a little. The following school year started, though, and in her senior year, she was re-exposed to her friends on a daily basis, and then she started using again pretty regularly.
Yep.
So her parents, though, were wise this time and knew exactly how to recognize the signs.
Okay.
She was sleeping more, she was losing weight again, she was starting, her behavior was starting to change, and they knew she was back into it. So
good for them being right,
yeah, they were on top of it. So January 1994, an argument ensues between Kristin and her mom, because her mom again confronted her that she suspected she was using. And it escalated, and ultimately this led to Constance, her mom, finding a glass pipe in her room again. So Constance did like the tough love mom thing, and she picked up the phone and called the cops. And she called the police on her daughter. And Kristin, was altered at this time. Like, you could she was actively high, like, during this whole situation. So the cops come, they recognize that she's altered, and they search her and found a packet of actual meth on her person. So Kristin was arrested. They went through booking, and
how hard for her mom.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine? I mean, if I were a parent, though, my God, if I had put my kid through rehab and then, they had relapsed, like, I would want to help them. But also, like, you're bringing this shit into my house. Like that, you know what I mean? Like that,
with your younger siblings around.
Yes. I don't pretend to know what I would do in that situation, but I got to side with Constance here. I'm not going to lie. I feel like that was a wicked badass thing to do. She had some balls doing it, and she felt like her daughter needed it at the time.
She had some balls doing it, but I'm sure it wasn't an easy decision either.
Oh, God, no. I'm sure she did not enjoy any part of watching her daughter being taken away in handcuffs. My God. So during her time just being booked in the police station, apparently Kristin disclosed to the police a few names of her friends at school who use, and also who she purchased meth from at her school. So in response to her giving that information, no charges ended up being filed, and she was released back to her parents because she had a clean record prior to this. So she was very cooperative during her time at the police station. But unfortunately, her friends at high school got wind of her name dropping them to the police.
She snitched. Oh, God, that must have caused such backlash for her.
Yeah, so her friend group just completely evaporated, right? And that didn't stop. It didn't stop there, though, because her family, like, started getting death threats, like, from these people. Oh, it was like a huge deal. So,
my God.
Her poor parents. I can't even imagine going through this. So immediately her parents, dove into action and pulled her out of this school in the middle of her senior year. And they were going to enroll her in a different school, but it looked like after they had talked to like her guidance people that she actually had achieved enough credits to graduate, and she could graduate a little early. So she was able to graduate early. She got her diploma. And Ralph, shortly after this, actually left his job at Claremont, this great job that he had, because it was a little bit too far away. There was a little bit of a commute, and he transferred to join the University of Redlands, which was closer to home, because he felt like he needed to be there for his family and for Kristin at this time.
Of course.
So shortly thereafter, Kristin applies at University of Redlands, and she gained admission. Now, Ralph would drive her to campus, and she would attend classes while he taught, and then he would pick her up at the end of the day and bring her home. So this was like they're starting the little rides thing again, and they're starting to like ride in the car again. So it brought the two closer again, and Ralph was like optimistic this year that things were going to start like turning around. Mind you,
like
she's
they're
still
putting the pieces back together.
Yes. Now, she's still 17 at this point. Like, she's going to turn 18 pretty soon, but she's still pretty young. Now, unfortunately, she was able to connect with some questionable people again at Redlands, and she quickly starts falling into her old habit of using meth.
Isn't it so, like, aren't you noticing a pattern how it's not hard for her to find this stuff, right?
No, God, it's not hard. It wouldn't be hard for me and you. It wouldn't be hard for me and you to go outside and find it. It's just everywhere. I don't even want to
think about that.
I know. It's very scary. As a parent now, like, it's very scary, So, She managed, despite, her meth habit coming back, she managed to keep her grades up during that first spring semester. But the following semester, she had convinced her parents to let her move off, onto campus into a dorm.
Uh-oh.
So she had been doing so well, and she had managed to convince them that, she was off the drugs and doing great. Mm-hmm. So this was the first time Kristin had, real freedom from her parents, and I don't really think she was prepared to handle this very well, without her parents, without her parents' constant support, she quickly spiraled again. And by the following spring semester, her sophomore year, during a routine dorm inspection, her drug paraphernalia was found in her dorm room, and she was immediately expelled. So at this point, she's 18. She had just turned 18 when this expulsion happens, right? So her family is not notified because she's an adult. This is her problem, not her family's problem. So instead of telling her family, hey, I'm coming home, she took her shit and packed it up and took off and left. So Constance was due to arrive and pick her daughter up from Redlands to come home for winter break, a couple of days later, as the two had planned to do for,
she's
the recent past.
Be found.
And she gets to her dorm room and it's fucking empty, and she has no idea where her daughter is.
Or how long she's been gone.
Yes. So she talks to the administration and realizes that she was expelled, and immediately is she's back on the drugs, and she could literally be anywhere. She could be dead. I don't know. And so her parents are worried sick. Worried sick. So for all she knew, she could be dead. So Constance goes and files a missing persons report immediately. Unfortunately, she's 18, and the police could do very little since it was evident that she took off on her own. She had every right to not be found if she didn't want to, which, was very little comfort to her poor family, who are not even sure if she's okay.
Right.
What a devastating position to be in as a parent. So
can they stay 2 and 3? That would be great.
Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah. So, meanwhile, while her parents are, dying of worry, Kristin is couch surfing with some friends, hopping from place to place and using meth every single day. She didn't have a job or any remaining money. She decided to move south, sort of past San Diego and towards the Mexican border. She starts looking for a place to stay and eventually found this cheap motel, right near the border. And it at least got her, a roof over her head and off her friends' couches and off the streets. So apparently one afternoon, December 1994, she left her room, grabbed her stuff, and started heading for the border. Now, we don't know exactly why she was heading for the border, but people in the throes of addiction will often head for the border in search of a cheap fix, essentially.
I'm starting to cringe a little bit.
I know. So this whole story is just so sad how this all unfolds. So she starts walking across this footbridge. So there's a footbridge over the border at the time. And she dropped her coat or her sweatshirt or something. And as she stops to grab it, she sort of collides or bumps into this very nice looking 21-year-old gentleman by the name of Gregory DeVillers. The two locked eyes. And
how coincidental.
I know. This was literally a really sketchy rom-com, how this all unfolded. And there were immediate fireworks, these two locked eyes. And it was hey, how you doing? And
by the border. And so the two start chatting, and they just hit it off. It was this really quick, thing. First of all, Greg thought she was absolutely gorgeous because she was. And is.
And she has these gorgeous blue eyes, this blonde hair. She's really petite, beautiful, beautiful girl. And the two immediately, hop over the border and go bar hopping in Tijuana together. Because so relatable,
Let's
right?
do that with a stranger.
Yeah, who doesn't?
Safe.
Who doesn't? So, Kristin was actually really good at like keeping up appearances for the most part, and Greg had no idea that she was like an addict and she was like looking for a fix. So she was just like so used to hiding that part of her life that it was natural that she would hide it from Greg. So
some guy she doesn't even know.
Exactly. So Greg is a student at University of San Diego, and he was completing his biology degree, and he had an off-campus apartment. Now, Kristin, after they were done partying, invited Greg back to her hotel room, and he was like, that place sounds really sketchy, and it does not sound safe, so I have some roommates, but you're more than welcome to come and stay with me at my apartment for the night.
Smart guy, Greg.
Yeah, he's actually like this really great guy. Like, we love Greg. And so Kristin, of course, obliges, and she had her stuff with her. So she was like, okay, like it was close by. So from here, they were together for several days. Greg, like I said, had some roommates who noticed that like he fell so hard and fast for this girl. Like there was just immediate infatuation. Like the two were just, you know, absolutely all about each other. Like, very magical. He was sold. Yep. Stick a fork in me. He was done. The two were together at this point for like several days, and Greg's roommates had noticed that, you know, didn't you just like meet this girl clubbing and now she's like essentially crashing here for like several days? But like, here. Okay,
she, you know, okay.
And Kristin is still actively using and is likely using meth like routinely at this point, like a few times a day. Greg did not have a clue. She hid this so well, and she never mentioned her history of drug use to him. She never mentioned her rehab stay, never mentioned her parents are looking for her. Like, all of this was just this big secret. So
I have another life.
Which is like this great way to start off this magical new relationship, honestly.
It's called fraud.
It's called fraud. It's called lies. So she told Greg that she had actually just moved there and was just trying to get on her feet. A week after they met, Greg asked her to formally move in with him.
A week?
Yeah, a week. And the roommates were like, what?
No.
Eventually they did concede, and she ended up staying there. Now his roommates were actually the first to notice some weird characteristics about Kristin.
Once you're living with someone, it doesn't take long to pick up on habits.
It becomes very hard to hide stuff like this. So they noticed that she seemed to have like a couple of different personalities. Like she would be, you know, this like happy-go-lucky person one moment, and then very quickly be like irritable and anxious and paranoid, like very characteristic of
coming off your high.
Yes, exactly. So after they lived together for a few weeks, Greg ended up actually finding a glass pipe in Kristin's jacket. Okay. Now, the truth was out. So Kristin, of course, assured him that, yes, I am using, but I am really trying to quit. And he was hurt that he wasn't aware and that she didn't feel like she could tell him, but he was also so infatuated with her, and he loved Kristin, and he just wanted to help her get sober. So he's like, I'm going to be here. I'm going to do whatever I can do to help you. Kristin did at first seem to really put in a lot of effort. So she like started picking up work, and she was at one point actually working like 3 different part-time jobs. And in January of 1995, after encouragement from Greg, Kristin actually finally reached out to her parents. So
good. So this is after how long?
Yeah, like almost a year. Yeah.
Her poor mother.
I know. Can you imagine? And
that whole time she's probably thinks she's dead.
Yeah. And so her parents were, of course, just over the moon to just hear her voice and know that she was alive. And so they start reconnecting a little bit over the phone. Unfortunately, Kristin started to quickly spiral out of control again. And as soon as she was sober, she was not sober anymore. Her roommates started noticing again some of their items would go missing, like some of their belongings here and there. And it turned out that Kristin was stealing the items and then selling them for drug money. Yes. They told Greg. Greg confronted her about this. She apologized. Once again, Greg stuck by her and forgave her for everything.
So
Greg's
hard.
one fault is that he forgives her way too much, and we're going to see exactly how bad this gets.
He's not the only one though when you're in love with an addict.
Well, it just sucks the soul out of you, and if a loved one has an addiction like this, it just depletes the entire family. Entire family systems are affected by stuff like this. It's just so sad. So April 1995, Kristin is still 18, she's just barely still 18, starts working in the law office that Greg worked at part-time. And sort of like
noticing some codependence here?
Oh, very much so.
A little bit.
Very much so. Codependence, and also chasing that rush feeling, right? Like the rush of the high, the rush of the new relationship, the rush of leaving and being on her own. All of these new exciting feelings are very exciting for her. So, Kristin then starts working at this law office, right? Sort of in like an administrative or secretarial role. And by fall of 1995, she had enrolled in San Diego State University, where Greg was going part-time, majoring in chemistry. Remember, she is like such a science buff. Now, that June, Greg popped the question, and the two were just like so in love. They had sort of like said yes in like a moment of excitement, but then ultimately decided shortly after that to like put off the engagement and the wedding a little bit instead, and have sort of like a long semi-engagement, because Kristin was starting to work towards this degree, and they both had a lot of school left to go, and said, we'll do it. Well, obviously we'll get married after school's done.
Well, like that's smart too, because to also not derail the progress that she's making,
Exactly right. So over the next year, Kristin stayed sober against all the odds, and they both actually did great in school. And I think school then became, this other thing that Kristin could just pour her energy into whenever she could, because she wasn't dancing. She wasn't doing anything she really liked to do anymore. And then in October 1996, the couple goes on this weekend getaway for Kristin's birthday, and Greg sort of proposed again, like an official proposal.
Like, are you ready now?
Yeah. And then so she says yes, and they start really making wedding plans at this point. Now, June 1997 rolls around. Kristin applies for this paid internship in the toxicology lab at the county's medical examiner's office. Now, here she would learn about the role of the forensic toxicologist. So her day-to-day work was to use her knowledge of toxicology and chemistry to help discern like the manner of death for those who come in for an autopsy.
It's so interesting.
It's fascinating. What a crazy field to work in. And toxicologists perform testing testing to discern the manner of death by using various samples of tissue. They can use body fluids, skin, hair, saliva. They often take samples of kidney and liver to test for the presence of chemicals and drugs. And they test using all these different reagents, and then they use all their data to like form an opinion on which substances are present and what might have been responsible for someone's death. And another thing that they're responsible for is they often appear in court to testify in major cases.
And it's like the longest wait ever when you're waiting for those reports to come back.
Oh my gosh, it does take a while. And because it's an extreme amount of work, people think that it's just as, you just have to send a vial of blood for a quick test, and that's what it is. But it's not. It's very complicated. So in this environment, she would likely regularly come into contact with multiple chemicals and illicit drugs, because if somebody dies and has drugs on them, those drugs then get sent to the medical examiner's office for testing and to confirm, certain compounds that are similar. Like, yes, this particular batch of meth was found in this person. Or
right. And what was in it? Because a lot of times there's more stuff in it.
Exactly. Was this cut with fentanyl? Is that why they died? Like, you don't know.
Oh, this is not good.
So not probably the best environment for her to be working at. And especially because as someone who was like sort of working in a lab technician and a toxicology capacity, part of her job was literally to receive, catalog, and file these drugs. So she herself was often handling these drugs. Anything that came in the door, oxycodone, fentanyl, heroin, anything that came in the doors, it would go through Kristin or a colleague. So
that's a setup waiting to happen.
It really is. So Kristin does this for a few years, but she loves it. The work is great. She was clean. She was becoming more independent financially. This internship paid pretty well, and her love for chemistry really gave her like this alternative focus. And oftentimes in the undergraduate and graduate chemistry programs, students are actually given like a stipend just to attend. So
really?
I remember hearing about this. So, she was doing really well financially, and she was finally like feeling like a real adult, like making adult money and being independent. So Greg at this point is getting a little clingy because he sees that Kristin is like coming into her own a little bit. And, she started to get the sense that Greg was holding her back a little bit.
He's starting to feel left behind.
Right. I mean, he really liked the way things were, like with her depending on him for everything and her just like kind of being the screw up and him having to like pull her back together and coming to her rescue. And as most relationships do, things tend to like cool off a little bit between two people. But Kristin could really tell that Greg was not as like voraciously into her, like in this capacity, with her being like her own independent woman as he once was. So she was definitely not as into him, and she starts looking for some more excitement because Kristin likes excitement.
Chasing the next high.
Oh, yeah. So winter 1998, Kristin starts having an affair with a coworker. They got to know each other pretty well at work, and then, of course, would like email and message each other throughout the day, and they start spending a lot of time together outside of work. Spring of 1999, Greg didn't really seem to notice Kristin growing distant, and he was pretty busy, with his graduate program himself. And he ended up finding this really well-paying job that was, pretty demanding at a local biotech firm. And Kristin continued to see, her work lover pretty regularly. And as this going on,
lover.
his name is not released. I don't have his name, but he's the work lover. As this is going on, the wedding plans are like continuing. Like she's actively planning a wedding during this time. Isn't that wild? It's just crazy, So eventually, Kristin's side piece actually ends up
there's a better name
relocating to New York. So the side piece moves away. She did maintain communication with him for a brief time, but the two didn't really like see each other physically. So things eventually did kind of fizzle out, but they were still communicating like as the wedding approached. And Kristin did get kind of nervous about the whole thing, like right before it happened. And since, she's like actively like having sex with somebody else, she did eventually start like confiding in her mom about how nervous she was about the wedding. And she didn't tell her mom about the affair, but she said, I'm really nervous. I hope I'm doing the right thing. And her mom just said, honey, it's just cold feet. Like you'll be fine, and you should marry him, and he's a really good guy. Now the two, Kristin and Greg.
Thanks, Mom, for listening.
I know. Well, she didn't know. She didn't know about the affair.
I know.
The two got married in the summer of 1999 after dating for 4.5 years. Now,
so they're wedded.
Yeah, they're wed. Now, after the wedding, like a day after, Kristin was like emailing with this former side piece in New York, and the two were like still actively communicating. And they continued to talk routinely for a while, and there was like some emotional affair going on there for a while, but the distance did make it sort of fizzle out, and eventually she did move on from him. Now, in March of 2000, at age 23...
Was she not happy with Greg after the wedding? Like, there's a high right there.
Well, the thing is, things fizzled out with Greg like a little while ago. She's already like moved on.
If the wedding like picked it up a little bit.
Apparently not, because she's emailing the side piece in New York like the day after the wedding, saying, "Hey, I'm
kind of hard to have a side piece when he's not next to your side."
In March of 2000, she's now 23 years old. She completes her degree at the university, and she begins working at the medical examiner's office full time as an actual toxicologist there. So shortly after she starts working there at a full-time employee capacity, Dr. Michael Robertson comes on board as well as the chief toxicologist. Now, this is Kristin's direct supervisor role. He was this young 30-year-old guy from Australia. So he has like this sexy Australian accent. All you Aussies out there, we know you're listening. You know what's up. Super, super good looking. And at age 30, already had like a very notable career in chemistry and toxicology. Like he's a very impressive young man. Immediately sparks are flying between the two at work. Like they start flirting.
I was going to say, is this the new
getting
side
real
piece?
Weird. Yes, this is the new side piece. So they would email each other throughout the day. They would exchange looks, and it got real flirty. Eventually, this explodes into this like other, romantic affair.
Poor Greg.
Now, I know, Jesus, poor Greg is like so in the dark about all of this. Now, Dr. Robertson, Michael, was also married. So,
jerk.
This was incredibly scandalous for like a number of reasons. So obviously, Kristin's married. He's also her direct supervisor, which is like kind of a big no-no.
Yep.
So they could both lose their jobs and their entire families if anybody found out about this. So Kristin was obviously gorgeous, and he was good looking as well. And the two became just absolutely infatuated and just inseparable. She really liked that Dr. Robertson was her superior and that he could possibly help and advance her career if she needed him to. Hey everybody, it's Kate from Med Crimes again, here to tell you about another great podcast I'm listening to. Three Spooked Girls is a twice-a-week true crime and paranormal podcast where they discuss a wide variety of topics, such as the Stanley Hotel, which is that really creepy hotel from The Shining, Japanese ghosts, Casey Anthony, which is getting a lot of national attention right now, Ed Kemper, Tamla Horsford, and more every Monday. They turn out so much content that there's something for everybody in here. They return every Thursday for a mini-sode from their Stabby Snippet series, which is always a true crime case told by Jessica or Tara. Along with the facts and advocating for the victims of the cases that they cover, the ghouls also love to bring laughs, themed drinks, and scares. Join Three Spooked Girls anywhere you get your podcasts. Follow them on social media under the handle 3 Spooked Girls and Tara's TikTok for bite-sized content of cases and spooky topics as spooky_sleuth. That's 3 Spooked Girls anywhere you get your podcasts. Subscribe today. Within a few months of starting the affair, Kristin started getting real ballsy about the entire thing. And she starts being like less secretive. And
she got loose-lipped.
A little bit. She wasn't like telling people, but she also was making like zero effort to hide their relationship.
Shit.
And like she was like openly flirting with him, and they were coming and going together. And it was just like people started to notice.
It's not wise.
And be like, you guys know that this is real sketch, right? Meanwhile, poor Greg is still just like at his little biotech firm, just like existing, thinking that he has this gorgeous, faithful wife at home.
Waiting for wifey to come home.
It's just like the saddest thing. So now it's unclear exactly when and why Kristin relapsed, but shortly after this second affair ended up happening, she started using methamphetamine again. I'm assuming that the routine exposure to the drugs had something to do with it, and just the temptation was just too much.
Maybe pressures and...
Exactly. So she began by stealing the methamphetamine and like right from the office. Now, as I had said before, part of Kristin's job was to log and store the drugs found at crime scenes for later use and later testing. But many drugs passed through her hands, and this is how she would skim the drugs for herself. And it may certainly, so the drugs would get logged and then placed in these like little manila envelopes, kind of. And then these envelopes would get placed in this big lockbox that had a slot on it, so that the clerical staff could then file them or do the testing. So apparently there was not great like management of these substances throughout this whole facility, because this box did not get emptied regularly at all. And if someone really wanted to, they could even stick their hand through the slot and take out an envelope full of drugs and like walk off with it. Very poorly regulated in general. People would even just like leave these envelopes just like on their tables and desks and like walk away and go have lunch. Like this was routine, that these things were just like laying around the office. So
you do realize it's controlled substances, people.
Yeah, like that's just a
like
thing.
Legit.
Exactly. So rumors start circulating at her work, you know, that Kristin and Michael Robertson are having an affair, right? Because she's making it very obvious that some shit's going down. She starts being really brazen, not just about the affair, but about her drug use, and would even just like grab some meth and duck into one of the rooms that have like a ventilation hood, like one of the chemistry rooms, and flip on the hood and like smoke meth right there at the office.
Oh, Jesus, that's ballsy.
Yeah, for real. So as rumors
so
start
like
to circulate,
it's all, even though it's like semi-accessible because of how she can get to it, it's still all logged.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Well, not all of it, because, I mean, people would come in with this stuff, and Kristin was easily able to skim it because she was the one logging the stuff.
So she just had a couple...
So she would just say, oh, you know, I got one little packet of meth here. In actuality, there were 3, and she would take the other 2, and there would be no record. So...
That's sketchy.
At this point, because people are starting to get suspicious of her and her supervisor, Michael Robertson, the pair get summoned by their joint supervisor. And they get talked to about the affair allegations, because this would be a very serious situation, obviously. They both denied the allegations. They said it's just rumors. And, of course, the administration had no proof. So... they just got like a warning and said, listen, if you guys are fucking, just stop. Okay. And they got sent back to work.
We're taking it no further. Just stop.
Yes. Just stop. So at this point, Greg starts to have suspicions that something is going on. He's not exactly sure
about
what.
Time, Greg.
She's been a lot more absent lately. She's obviously spending a lot of time with this guy. And also, like, she's using again. So those behaviors are coming back and the physical changes are coming back. So finally, Greg finds a love letter from Dr. Robertson to Kristin.
Oh, shit.
Among her belongings. And so he blows up at his wife, obviously. And the two get in this huge fight. And ultimately, Greg ended up calling Robertson on the phone and basically told him off, said, stay the hell away from my wife.
That a boy!
I know. Yeah, Greg. Get it, Greg. Greg is still so in love with Kristin and did not want to lose his wife. So this is where, like, that toxic forgiveness is coming in.
Yeah, because now it's also like, okay, dude, she's been playing you for a long time.
Here's the thing, though. I think I kind of know why. Because apparently Greg's father had abandoned his family and left the country to start a new family with somebody else when he was young. And this was this cut him real deep. So
he's just like determined to not be like his dad.
He's like, I don't want to split up my marriage. Like, I committed to this and she committed to this. And like, so he's like, let's work on our trust. Let's go to couples counseling. Let's do couples counseling. So she was like, I mean, okay, I guess, but like not really all that enthusiastic about fixing shit because she's so in love with Dr. Robertson at this point. So that summer, she starts low-key looking for a place to live without Greg. She's like looking for a new apartment and I'm just going to live somewhere. She's like ready to move on. Also, she tells Greg, like, listen, I want to go to this work conference. And Robertson was going to be at this conference, which Greg didn't know.
Of course he was.
Greg didn't know that.
Of course.
And so he was like, yeah, whatever, go to your conference. And so she goes to the conference. Robertson's there too. The two spent the entire time together. And the two were still obviously very much in love. So she returns home to her husband, who she doesn't really like anymore. And of course, the two start fighting. Greg ends up going through her stuff and ends up finding some pills. I don't know what kind of pills. But he freaks out, accusing her of relapsing, which she had. She adamantly denies it. For the time being, Greg did let it go. In the coming weeks, Kristin continues to pull away and was putting more and more of her attention towards Robertson.
She's such the modern day term of a gaslighter.
Oh my God, she gaslights the shit out of poor Greg. She just denies, takes no responsibility for her shitty actions, is not following through on her commitments, and is pretty shitty human being. Yes, exactly right. So, so Kristin's still pulling away, putting more and more attention on Robertson. One night, Greg actually caught her reading another love letter from Michael to Kristin.
Oh, snap.
And
stop leaving this shit around.
I know. So this starts to heat up, turns into this huge explosive fight. Greg is still so desperate to save their marriage. So he decides to pull out this threat, and he goes, if you don't stop seeing this guy, I'm going to tell your supervisors that you're seeing your supervisor, that you are like having an affair with this guy. And I'm going to let them know that you are using and that you're probably stealing drugs from work. So, I mean, essentially, what Greg was doing was threatening this entire life that she had built. And any semblance of weird little happiness she had was going to disappear. I'm going to guess
she didn't take that very well.
So this sent Kristin into a rage, and she utterly snapped. She knew she couldn't let any of that happen. And that is the end of part one.
I knew it. I was like, she's getting ready to stop. I could tell. Shit's about to hit the fan and Kate stops. Nice little dance, by the way. Well, Kate, thank you once again. And I'm sitting here going, so what's she going to do? She made it on our show for a reason.
She's a med crime. That bitch is a med crime. I'm just saying. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Well, you guys, we love coming on here and doing this for you. We hope you're all having a really happy and safe holiday. And you can follow us on Instagram at MedCrimes Podcast.
I hope you're not thinking about this episode during your holiday season. Just don't.
Me too.
Just don't.
Yeah.
You can check us out on Facebook by searching MedCrimes Podcast.
You can tweet at us.
Wait, did you already say that?
No, I said
you did
Instagram.
Oh.
We're doing it backwards. So you can tweet at us at MedCrimesPC.
Or you can send us your crazy stories, your awesome ideas, or any kind of communication with us that you want at medcrimes@gmail.com.
And if you wish to become a Patreon, you can visit www.patreon.com/medcrimespodcast.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! We love you guys.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Toodles.
Stay safe out there.